And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to be looking at some of my predictions for the games that are going to be taking place tonight. There's only going to be two games happening tonight because these two games are important for the NBA Cup, the in-season tournament. And it's going to be Western Conference and Eastern Conference teams that are going to be playing on that day. Today, I should say, not on that day. And the first game that we are going to talk about is the Knicks and their matchup against the Hawks. Now, the Knicks, they're going to have, I think the Knicks are going to have home field advantage in this matchup. I think they are. I'm not entirely sure because the Bucks, I think it's going to be, I think that's how it's going to work. I'm not entirely sure who gets home field advantage, but considering how the Knicks, they hold the wild card spot, it would be a little bit odd for them to get home field advantage as opposed to the Hawks. But, regardless, the Knicks, they do have a much better team record than the Hawks. So maybe that's what determines the team that gets home field advantage. Again, this is relatively new, so I'm not entirely sure. But regardless, the Hawks, they're going to have to play the Knicks, and we all know the beef with Atlanta and the Knicks. Knicks fans to this day are still screaming F Trae Young, and they do not like Trae Young. For those of you guys who haven't been keeping up with basketball, in 2021, Trae Young ended up eliminating the Knicks from the playoffs. This was the first time that the Knicks actually made the playoffs. And while I will say that Julius Randle played absolutely awful in that series, Trae Young silenced the entirety of the crowd. And in game one, Trae Young ended up hitting this floater, and it just destroyed every single Knicks fan's heart. And he was, afterwards, he was like, it's quiet in here, all that stuff. And really, it's like, the Knicks and the Knicks fans, they did not like him at all after that. They absolutely despised him. And to this day, they're still screaming F Trae Young, F Trae Young. They do not like Trae Young at all. And now they're going to match up in an NBA Cup. They're probably going to play in Madison Square Garden. I would not be surprised if Trae Young ends up getting booed out of his mind in this game. And that kind of scares me because I have the Knicks winning this game, but I would not be surprised if Trae Young just decides to go off. Like, he has done that before against the Knicks, and he's beaten the Knicks several times, and he loves hearing the criticism. He loves hearing those overrated chants. He loves hearing those you're not like the trash talking. He loves the banter, and he's one of those players where it's like if you get him going and you really get him upset, he is going to ball out. And that's sort of what really scares me from picking the Knicks in this matchup. Especially, not to mention the Knicks and their history of choking and losing in games where they should have won. So it's also really difficult to play in Madison Square Garden as a Knick, in my opinion. Like, it's one of the most difficult places to actually play because there's no doubt in my mind that Trae Young is going to try and have the best game of his life playing in the Garden. And that's really sort of hesitant. That's really making me hesitate on picking the Knicks and winning this game. But on paper, I genuinely think that this Knicks team has a much better roster than this Atlanta Hawks team. Karl Anthony Towns has already proven, he's already got a nickname, Bodega Cat. Because, there's a bunch of bodegas over in New York and a bunch of Dominicans, because Karl Anthony Towns is Dominican. They all have those bodegas. And that's why he sort of got that nickname. And he's been very good. He's been very good with the Knicks, and the team as a whole has been fantastic. In fact, there are only two players in the Eastern Conference right now that I believe are averaging 25 plus points on 45% efficiency, and those two players are Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. So this team is very dangerous. This team has a lot of chemistry, and I think overall the lineup and the matchups that they have are a lot better suited to go up against the Hawks. So if I were to, I'm sticking with my gut, and I'm going to go ahead and pick the Knicks in this one, but I would not be surprised if Trae Young goes off and has one of the best games of his life against the Knicks in this game. Now, the next matchup, the Warriors, they're going up against the Houston Rockets. Now, if you guys remembered from the previous prediction that I did, I thought that the Houston Rockets were going to beat the Warriors, but the last time that happened was when Russell Westbrook was on Houston. And the reality is that this Warriors team has owned this Houston Rockets team for years. But I'm going to be stubborn, and I'm going to go ahead and pick Houston again to win this game. I think now is the time. If there was any time for them to win a game against the Golden State Warriors, it would be right now in this big game. I think the Houston Rockets, they are a much better team than the Golden State Warriors, and like overall they have better players. Steph Curry could go off in this game, which also it's really like most of my predictions for today, they're really streaky. It's really like I want to pick them, but at the same time I could totally see them losing, if that makes sense. And with the Golden State Warriors, they have Steph Curry, who's arguably a better shooter than Trae Young and a much more efficient shooter than Trae Young. This season, you can make the argument that maybe they're roughly the same, but again, it's still Steph Curry, so it's like you can't really argue with the greatest shooter of all time. And if there was, like I said, if there was any time for the Houston Rockets to beat the Golden State Warriors, it would be now. They have home field advantage, I believe, in this game. This game starts at 9:30, and again, I think they have a much better roster than the Golden State Warriors. It's just they're going to have to be fighting against a little bugaboo where they have been unable to beat the Golden State Warriors for the last few years. And I'm still going to be stubborn, and I'm going to stick with my gut, and I'm going to go ahead and pick Houston in this matchup. I was right for the last two matchups in the NBA in-season tournament, in those cup games. I thought that the Bucks were going to win, and I also thought that the Thunder were going to win. I ended up being right both times. So I'm looking to go ahead and continue that streak in these two games. So hopefully I can stay right. Hopefully the Knicks end up winning, and hopefully the Houston Rockets end up winning in this matchup. Now, any players that have been injured, I do not see an injury report, and obviously, like, with the way that injuries work, most of the time it's like we don't really get a green light up until like when the game starts. Like, most of the time there would be players who are either load managing or they have minor injuries, and they will not get cleared up until like, almost near tip off. So it's like not entirely sure whether or not some players are going to be injured in this matchup. Also not entirely sure if that's going to affect any of the results in these games. But with that being said, those are my predictions, and that's really all that I have to say in this fourth segment. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the fifth segment where we talk about the Jets getting eliminated from the playoffs again. And I'll be right back after this short break, so be sure to tune in if you guys are interested.